are starting with a new chapter in a new unit. The unit is diversity in the living world, and the chapter that we are starting with is the first chapter in this unit, that is the living world. Now whenever we talk of the living, that means difference between living and non-living organisms, we talk about certain characteristic features which are seen or which are shown by the living organisms, and we will also discuss whether these characteristics are the real defining characters of living organisms. Can we take them as the exclusive characters of living organisms? That is what is our point of discussion here. So let us first sum up all the general characters that we talk of. We say the living organisms, they grow, they reproduce, they respond to stimuli, this is what we normally talk about. They also show movement, locomotion. So these are taken as the living characteristics. We will talk about all these characteristics one by one, and we'll try to analyze whether it is a defining property or not. We say that living organisms, they grow. Is it only living organism which grows, or are there some non-living organisms also which show growth? What exactly is growth? Growth is increase in size, mass and number of cells when we are talking in terms of the living organism. If a small cell is formed, it starts to grow in size, we say the cell is growing. If an organism, it is having few cells, the cells multiply, divide, and the number of cells increases, then we say the organism is growing. If the mass of the organism increases, we also say that the organism is growing. So far it sounds like that this is an exclusive character of living organism. Let us take an example of a non-living thing. Mountains. Do mountains grow? Mountains also grow, but there is a difference. Living organisms, they grow from inside. There is accumulation of protoplasm or protoplasmic material from within, whereas mountains, they grow due to addition of substances from outer side. So mountains also grow, but from outside, and living organisms grow from within. This is the non-living. And when we talk of living, the growth is from inside. But if we talk only about the word growth, then we cannot take it as a defining property of the living organisms. So here we will write that growth is not a defining property of living organisms. Let us talk about the other property, that is response to stimuli. Living organisms respond to stimuli. That means they are aware of their surrounding. This is awareness of the surrounding or our environment. Now, if we are reading few things and our focus is on a book, but somebody walks by, we still are able to understand that there is some movement around us. That means we know what is happening around us. This is awareness of our surrounding or our environment. Non-living organisms or non-living objects, they are not aware of the surrounding. Here we will take one more example, and that is if a person is in coma. The person who is in coma is not aware of what is happening in the surrounding. The doctors visit them, they prick, they give them injections, but still the person in coma doesn't respond to the stimulus. So, should we consider that person in coma dead because it is not responding to the stimuli around that person? The person is not responding to the changes which are taking place. There are people visiting this person. There can be family members. The person doesn't respond to anything. So, is this person in coma living or dead? The person is definitely living. But here, when we talk of the response to stimulus or awareness about surrounding, we normally talk about that we are responding to certain characters or certain things or chemicals which are from outside. But is this person responding to the drugs or the injections or the medicine which has been given to it? If yes, then the person is responding to stimuli. That means this is a defining property of living. So here we will write that consciousness or responding to stimuli is defining property of living organisms. Let us take the third characteristic, that is reproduction. Now when we talk of reproduction, living organisms do reproduce. The method of reproduction could be simple also. So all living organisms reproduce. What about mule? Mule is a hybrid of donkey and horses, and they are sterile. What about humans who have some kind of a problem in their reproductive system? Maybe the system is not proper, maybe the gamete formation is not proper, and they are infertile. So infertile humans, can they be considered as living? Obviously they are living, but are they reproducing? So can reproduction be taken as a defining property? It cannot be. So here again we will write that reproduction is not a defining property of living organism. From very early classes, we have been studying that all living organisms, they grow, respond to stimuli, they reproduce. So we have this thing in our mind that all these properties are exclusively living properties. But after studying this, now we realize that out of these three which we have studied, the first one, growth, is not a defining property because there are certain non-living things which also show growth. Consciousness, response to or responding to stimuli, is definitely exclusively living property. Reproduction, because there are certain living organisms who are not capable of reproduction. So this is also a non-defining property. We will take one more property, that is metabolism. Metabolism, that means all reactions in a cell or organism. All those reactions which take place in our body, it has to be a cell or an organism, are termed as metabolism. Metabolic reactions means the reactions which are required for respiration, breaking down of food in presence or absence of oxygen, digestion of food. All those reactions are metabolic reactions. We can get those reactions conducted outside the living body in a laboratory conditions, but the reactions still remain the reactions which are metabolic. If you remember, in chemistry, we talk about different terms. We talk about exothermic, endothermic reactions. Metabolism word is given to only those reactions which take place in the living system. We may perform experiments where we get those reactions or those particular processes take place outside the body, but they still remain the part of the living system. That means metabolism is also a defining property of the living organism, and this is taking place in the cell. So cellular organization is also a defining property. That means there are certain characteristics which we generally assign to living organisms. But now we know that there are only few characteristic features which are exclusively shown by living organisms. And when we are talking of this topic, that is living world, the first and the most important thing is to know which organism should be termed as living and what are those exclusive characteristics. Now we have understood what exactly we mean by what is living. So our idea of discussing this was to answer a question: what is living? Which organism should be termed as living? And after we have discussed all these properties, now we can say that all those organisms which have cellular organization, show metabolism, and are responding to stimuli or conscious about their surrounding can be considered as living. Growth, reproduction are not defining properties. Now in the next part we'll talk about, we have seen all the characteristics. Now how many living organisms are there and how do we start to study them?